History is filled with amazing cars that were built to change the world, but ended up as forgotten punchlines. From a car that could drive in the water to one with a secret third headlight, these are the stories of genius ideas that went horribly wrong. One car was so controversial that the government stepped in to shut it down. 1. Tucker 48. Let's start with a legend. A car so advanced, so full of genius ideas that it sent a shockwave through the entire auto industry in the late 1940s. The man behind it was Preston Tucker, a visionary who believed American cars were boring, slow, and unsafe. He was going to change all of that with his dream machine, the 1948 Tucker sedan, often called the Tucker Torpedo. Truth be told, this car was like something from the future. It had a padded dashboard to protect passengers in a crash. It had a windshield designed to pop out in one piece so people wouldn't get hurt by shattered glass. One of the most shocking things was its third headlight, right in the middle of the grille. This light would actually turn with the steering wheel to help you see around corners at night. And in the back, it had a massive 6-cylinder helicopter engine. This was a car built with airplane-level thinking. People were crazy about it. Preston Tucker was hailed as a genius, the man who would take down the big car companies in Detroit. But that's exactly why his dream turned into a nightmare. The big automakers did not like this new guy shaking things up. The thing is, you can't fight the giants and expect an easy ride. The Tucker 48 was an incredible car, but it was also incredibly expensive and difficult to build. Preston Tucker faced huge production problems. Then the government launched an investigation into his company for fraud. The bad press scared away all of his investors. Even though he was eventually found innocent of all charges, the damage was done. His company went bankrupt after building only 51 cars. It was a brilliant machine, a true look into the future, destroyed by controversy before it ever had a chance. The Tucker was a case of a great idea being taken down by outside forces. But what happens when a car company has all the power in the world and still manages to create one of the biggest failures in history? Second Edsel. In the mid-1950s, the Ford Motor Company was on top of the world. They decided they wanted to create a whole new brand of car, one that would fit perfectly between their affordable Fords and their luxury Lincolns. They spent years and hundreds of millions of dollars on research. They polled thousands of Americans. They hired poets to come up with the perfect name. This was going to be the biggest, most successful car launch in history. They called it the Edsel. The hype was unbelievable. Ford teased the public for over a year with ads that showed only covered silhouettes of the car. People were told this car would change everything. When it was finally revealed in 1957, it was packed with innovative features. It had something called Teletouch Drive, where the gear selector buttons were right in the middle of the steering wheel hub. It had a speedometer that would glow a different color when you went over the speed limit. It was supposed to be the car of the future. But when people finally saw it, they were just confused. One of the most shocking aspects of the Edsel was its front grille. It was a big vertical oval in the middle of the car. People didn't know what to make of it. Some said it looked like an old-fashioned horse collar. Others said it looked like something you'd find in a bathroom. It was just plain weird. On top of the strange looks, the car was expensive. It wasn't very reliable, and it came out right as the country was heading into an economic recession. After all the hype, the Edsel was a total flop. Ford lost the modern equivalent of billions of dollars on the project. The Edsel became so famous for being a failure that the name itself became a joke. The Edsel was a car that was all style and weird features, but the next car on our list had a genuinely dangerous idea at its core, one that would spark a nationwide panic and change the way we think about car safety forever. 3. Chevrolet Corvair. In the late 1950s, small, cheap, and fun cars from Europe, like the Volkswagen Beetle, were becoming super popular in America. The big American car companies had nothing to compete with them. So, in 1960, Chevrolet launched the Corvair, and on the surface, it was a truly innovative car for an American company. It was compact, stylish, and it had its engine in the back just like the Beetle. You see, putting the engine in the back was a radical idea for a mainstream American car. It was an air-cooled, flat-six engine, which was very unusual. This design made the car very spacious on the inside for its size. It didn't have a big engine up front, so the floor could be almost completely flat. It was a cool, forward-thinking car that won a bunch of awards. It was sporty, affordable, and different. But what people don't notice is that putting all that weight in the back of the car created a serious problem. The problem was with the car's handling. The rear engine design combined with its specific type of rear suspension could make the car very tricky to drive, especially in emergency situations. The rear wheels could tuck under the car during a hard turn, causing the driver to lose control and sometimes even roll over. This issue was brought to the public's attention by a young lawyer named Ralph Nader in his bombshell 1965 book, Unsafe at Any Speed. The book's first chapter was dedicated entirely to the Corvair. The public was horrified. Sales of the Corvair dropped like a rock. Even though Chevrolet later changed the suspension design and made the car much safer, the damage was done. The Corvair's reputation was ruined, and it was eventually discontinued. The Corvair's reputation was destroyed by safety fears, but our next car actually tried to be the safest car in the world, and it ended up failing for a completely different and much stranger set of reasons. 4. Bricklin SV1. In the mid-1970s, a millionaire named Malcolm Bricklin had a brilliant idea. He saw that car companies were being forced to make safer cars, but they were treating safety like a boring chore. He thought, what if you could make a car that was incredibly safe, but also looked like a super cool sports car? And so, the Bricklin SV1 was born. The name SV1 literally stood for Safety Vehicle 1. This car was loaded with futuristic safety features. It had a steel roll cage built right into the frame to protect you in a rollover. It had huge shock-absorbing bumpers that could handle a 5-mile-per-hour crash with no damage. The body wasn't made of steel, but of a colorful acrylic plastic bonded to fiberglass. The idea was that it was more durable and you wouldn't have to worry about scratches. And to top it all off, it had power-operated gull-wing doors, just like a spaceship. On paper, it was the perfect car for the safety-conscious 70s. But the thing is, all that safety made the car a total disaster. All those safety features were incredibly heavy. The steel roll cage, the big bumpers, and the complicated hydraulic system needed to lift those heavy doors made the Bricklin weigh a ton. It was so heavy that it was painfully slow, even with a big V8 engine. The acrylic body panels, which were supposed to be a brilliant innovation, would crack and fade in the sun. And those cool gull-wing doors, they were a nightmare. The hydraulic system was slow and unreliable. It could take up to 30 seconds for a door to open or close. And if the car's battery died, you were literally trapped inside. The car was a commercial disaster, and the company went out of business after just a few years. The Bricklin tried to be the ultimate safety car, but our next car took a completely different approach. It wasn't trying to be safe on the road, it was trying to get off the road entirely and go for a swim. 5. Amphicar Model 770. Have you ever been stuck in traffic on a bridge and thought, I wish I could just drive off the side and float down the river? Well, in the 1960s, a German company actually built a car that could do just that. It was called the Amphicar, and it was one of the strangest and most ambitious cars ever made. It was a car and a boat, all rolled into one weird package. The way it worked was pretty clever. On the road, it drove like a normal, albeit very slow, convertible. But when you got to a boat ramp, you would just drive it straight into the water. Once it was floating, you would pull a lever to engage 2 propellers at the back of the car. The front wheels acted as rudders to steer you through the water. The name, Model 770, came from its top speed, 7 knots in the water and 70 miles per hour on land. It was a truly remarkable piece of engineering, and it actually worked. People would drive their amphicars across the English Channel. Even President Lyndon B. Johnson owned one and loved to play pranks on unsuspecting guests at his ranch by driving them into the river. So why did it fail? Well, the truth is, the Amphicar was a terrible car and a terrible boat. On land, it was underpowered and handled poorly. In the water, it was slow and clumsy. And one of the most shocking things about it was that it was not very waterproof. They were famous for leaking. After every swim, the driver had to grease more than a dozen different points on the car to keep it from falling apart. It was a cool idea, a fun novelty, but it was just not a practical vehicle. Very few were sold, and they remain a bizarre footnote in automotive history. The Amphicar was a car that tried to do two things at once and didn't do either very well. But long before that, in the 1930s, one company tried to do just one thing perfectly: aerodynamics, and the public hated them for it. 6. Chrysler Airflow. Back in the 1930s, all cars looked pretty much the same. They were big, boxy, and upright, like a telephone booth on wheels. Car design was more about tradition than science. But a few brilliant engineers at Chrysler had a radical idea. What if they used the new science of aerodynamics to design a car that sliced through the wind? They were one of the first car companies to use a wind tunnel, and the car they created, the 1934 Chrysler Airflow, was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The Airflow was a marvel of engineering. Its body was smooth and rounded. The headlights were integrated into the fenders instead of being separate pods. The grille flowed backward into the hood, like the nose of an airplane. The engine was moved forward over the front wheels, and the passengers sat between the axles, not on top of them. This gave the car a much smoother ride and way more interior space. On paper, it was a revolution. It was safer, more comfortable, and more efficient than any other car on the road. It was the first truly modern car. But here's the kicker: people thought it was hideous. In 1934, the public was not ready for a car that looked like it was born in a wind tunnel. They were used to their tall, stately cars with long hoods and separate fenders. The Airflow looked strange, bulbous, and just plain weird to them. The radical design was so unpopular that it became a huge sales disaster. Chrysler panicked and quickly redesigned their other cars to look more conventional. The Airflow was a brilliant piece of engineering, a car that was 20 years ahead of its time. But it was a catastrophic failure because it was just too different. The Airflow was too futuristic for its own good. But our next car was a futuristic sports car from a company that was running out of time, and its bold design became its last desperate masterpiece. 7. Studebaker Avanti. By the early 1960s, the Studebaker Company, one of America's oldest car makers, was in deep trouble. They were struggling to compete with the big companies from Detroit. They needed something dramatic, something that would get people excited about Studebaker again. So, they hired a famous industrial designer named Raymond Loewy and gave him a wild challenge: design a high-performance sports car for the new decade. The result was the 1963 Studebaker Avanti. The Avanti looked like it was moving even when it was standing still. It had a long, swooping hood, a thin wasp-waisted body, and no front grille at all. The body wasn't made of steel, but of lightweight fiberglass, which was very advanced for the time. This allowed them to create a shape that would have been impossible with traditional metal stamping. The innovation didn't stop with the looks. The Avanti was one of the first American cars to have standard front disc brakes. It had a built-in roll bar for safety, and you could get it with a supercharged V8 engine that made it one of the fastest cars in the world. It was a stunning car, a true work of art that was praised by critics and car enthusiasts. It was Studebaker's last real shot at survival. But the thing is, developing a car this advanced is hard, and Studebaker was running out of money. Production of the fiberglass bodies was a complete mess, causing huge delays. Customers who had ordered the car got tired of waiting and canceled their orders. The Avanti got a reputation for poor quality control before it even really hit the streets. Studebaker's financial problems were just too big for one car to solve. The company stopped making cars in the US just a few years later, and the brilliant Avanti became a beautiful tombstone for a once great company. The Avanti was a masterpiece of design that was let down by production problems. But our next car was a masterpiece of engineering that was let down by a tiny but fatal flaw in its revolutionary engine. 8. NSU Row 80. In 1967, a small German car company called NSU unveiled a car that seemed to have come from another planet. It was the NSU Row 80, and it was voted Car of the Year in Europe. It was a large, sleek sedan with a futuristic design and a ride so smooth it felt like it was floating on air. But the real innovation was hidden under the hood. The Row 80 didn't have a normal piston engine. It had a Wankel rotary engine. You see, a rotary engine doesn't have pistons that go up and down. It has a triangular rotor that spins inside an oval-shaped housing. This design has far fewer moving parts. It's much smaller and lighter, and it's incredibly smooth and quiet. When you drove in Row 80, the engine was so vibration-free that the car came with a tachometer just to let you know if the engine was even running. It was a brilliant, elegant piece of technology that promised to be the future of the automobile, and for a little while it was. But what people don't notice is that there was a hidden flaw in this miracle engine. The tips of the triangular rotor had seals on them, kind of like the rings on a piston, and the material they used for these tip seals in the early 80s was not strong enough. They would wear out incredibly fast. Many engines needed to be completely rebuilt after only 15,000 miles. It was a disaster. NSU had to honor the warranties and replace thousands of engines, a cost that was so huge it bankrupted the company. They were eventually bought by Volkswagen. The Row 80 was a technological triumph, a car that was almost perfect, brought down by one tiny weak part. The Row 80 was a German car with a revolutionary engine. Our next car was a French car with an Italian engine, and its mind-boggling complexity was both its greatest strength and its ultimate downfall. 9. Citroën SM. In the world of cars, the French company Citroën has always been known for doing things differently. In 1970, they created their masterpiece, the Citroën SM. This was a car designed to be the most advanced grand touring car in the world. It was a big, beautiful, and incredibly strange machine that was packed with technology that was light years ahead of its time. First, there was the engine. Citroën owned the Italian sports car company Maserati at the time, so they put a powerful and compact Maserati V6 engine under the hood. Then there was the suspension. The SM had Citroën's famous hydropneumatic suspension, a system that used high-pressure gas and fluid instead of springs. This gave the car an unbelievably smooth ride, and it could raise and lower itself at the touch of a button. The steering was self-centering, meaning the wheel would always return to straight ahead on its own. And the headlights were pure magic. The inner set of headlights would physically turn with the steering wheel, illuminating the road around corners. It was like driving a spaceship. Truth be told, the SM was a car for engineers, not for normal people. It was incredibly complicated. Fixing it required a mechanic who was part plumber, part electrician, and part rocket scientist. It was also very expensive. Then in 1973, the oil crisis hit. Suddenly, nobody wanted a thirsty, expensive, and complex French-Italian Super Coupe. Sales plummeted, Maserati was sold off, and the supply of engines dried up. Citroën was forced to discontinue the SM. It was a car that tried to be everything, a true technological wonder, but it was just too clever, too complicated, and too expensive for the real world. The SM had headlights that turned with the steering wheel in 1970. But 4 years before that, an English company built a car with four-wheel drive and anti-lock brakes, a combination that wouldn't become common for another 20 years. 10. Jensen FF. Today, almost every SUV and a lot of high-performance cars come with all-wheel drive. It gives you better traction in bad weather and better grip on the road. But way back in 1966, a small British company called Jensen put a four-wheel drive system into a luxury sports car. The car was called the Jensen FF, and it was a technological pioneer. The FF looked very similar to another Jensen model called the Interceptor, but it was hiding some incredible secrets. The FF stood for Ferguson Formula, which was the name of the advanced four-wheel drive system it used. This wasn't a clunky system for off-road trucks. It was designed for high-speed safety on paved roads. One of the most shocking things about it was that it was also the very first production car in the world to be equipped with a mechanical anti-lock braking system. This was groundbreaking space-age technology for the mid-1960s. A big, powerful car that was incredibly safe and stable in any weather. So why isn't the Jensen FF remembered as one of the greatest cars ever? There were a few big problems. First, all that advanced technology was extremely expensive. The FF cost about 30% more than the regular Interceptor, putting it in the same price range as some of the most exotic cars in the world. Second, the four-wheel drive system was bulky and took up a lot of space. Because of the way it was designed, it was impossible to build a left-hand drive version for the huge American market, so it was only ever sold in the UK and a few other right-hand drive countries. It was a brilliant idea that was just too expensive and too complicated to be a commercial success. Only a few hundred were ever built. The Jensen FF was a pioneer of four-wheel drive and ABS. Our next car was a pioneer of another technology we see all the time today, turbocharging, but it came with a very strange catch. 11. Oldsmobile Jetfire. In the early 1960s, American car companies were obsessed with power. They were stuffing bigger and bigger engines into their cars. But Oldsmobile decided to try a smarter approach. In 1962, they launched the Oldsmobile Jetfire, a small, sporty coupe with a secret weapon under the hood. It was the world's first turbocharged production car, predating the famous Porsche 911 Turbo by over a decade. A turbocharger uses the car's exhaust gases to spin a turbine, which forces more air into the engine, creating a bigger bang and a lot more power. It's a way to make a small engine perform like a big one. Oldsmobile called their turbocharged V8 the Turbo Rocket Engine, and it was a beast. It made the little Jetfire incredibly fast for its size. It was an amazing piece of engineering that was years ahead of its time. But there was a problem, a big one that came from all that power. The thing is, forcing all that extra air into an engine can cause it to knock and ping, which can destroy the engine over time. To solve this, Oldsmobile came up with a very strange solution. The Jetfire had a special tank under the hood that you had to fill with a fluid they called turbo rocket fluid. It was a mix of distilled water, methanol, and a rust inhibitor. This fluid would be injected into the engine when the turbo kicked in to cool things down and prevent knocking. If the fluid ran out, a valve would open to reduce the turbo's power and protect the engine. It was a complicated system, and many owners either forgot to refill the tank or just didn't bother. This led to a lot of performance issues and a reputation for being unreliable. The idea was so unpopular that Oldsmobile canceled the Jetfire after just 2 years. The Jetfire was a small car trying to be a big car, but our next car was a small car that tried to be a wide car and ended up looking like a rolling fishbowl. 12. AMC Pacer. The 1970s was a time of big changes for the car industry. The oil crisis meant people wanted smaller, more efficient cars. But American car buyers were used to their big, roomy sedans. So, the American Motors Corporation, or AMC, came up with a wild idea. What if they made a car that was as short as a small car, but as wide as a big car? They called it the Pacer. And when it came out in 1975, it looked like nothing else on the road. The Pacer was famous for its shape. It was short, round, and had an enormous amount of glass. The designers wanted to give the driver an amazing view of the road, so they made the windows huge. It quickly got the nickname, the Flying Fishbowl. But the weirdness didn't stop there. One of the most shocking aspects of the Pacer was its doors. The passenger side door was actually 4 inches longer than the driver's side door. The idea was to make it easier for people to get into the back seat from the curb. It was a clever, if slightly strange, solution to a common problem. But all of that glass and that extra wide body made the Pacer very heavy for a small car. And because of some production issues, the revolutionary Wankel rotary engine that was supposed to power it never materialized. Instead, they had to stuff an old, heavy 6-cylinder engine under the hood. So you had a heavy car with an inefficient engine, which completely defeated the purpose of building a small car in the first place. People made fun of its looks, and it wasn't very good on gas. The Pacer was a bold and creative idea, but it ended up being a sales disappointment and another nail in the coffin for the struggling AMC. The Pacer's weird doors were meant to be practical, but our next car had a very impractical production process that involved flying car bodies across the Atlantic Ocean on a special airplane. 13. Cadillac Alante. In the late 1980s, Cadillac wanted to build a super luxury convertible to compete with European sports cars like the Mercedes-Benz SL. They wanted to create a car with the best of both worlds, Italian style and American engineering, so they teamed up with one of the most famous design houses in Italy, Pininfarina, the same company that designed classic Ferraris. The car they created was the Cadillac Alante. To say this car had a complicated birth is an understatement. The production process was one of the most bizarre in automotive history. The car bodies were built and painted by Pininfarina in Italy. Then, they were loaded onto specially designed Boeing 747 airplanes and flown over 3,000 miles to a Cadillac factory in Detroit. This process was called the Alente Air Bridge. Once in Detroit, workers would install the American-made engine and transmission. It was an incredibly complex and expensive way to build a car. The result was a handsome, luxurious convertible. But there were some major problems. Because it was a front-wheel drive car built on a modified sedan platform, it just wasn't very sporty. It couldn't compete with the performance of its European rivals. And because of that insane air bridge production process, the Alente was ridiculously expensive. It was one of the most expensive cars Cadillac had ever sold. People weren't willing to pay that much money for a Cadillac that wasn't as good as a Mercedes. It was a beautiful car with an incredible backstory, but it was a massive money loser for General Motors. The Alente was a car that tried to be European and failed. Our next car was a Japanese car that tried to be a European luxury coupe, and its most striking feature made it a commercial flop. 14. Subaru SVX. In the early 1990s, Subaru was known for building tough, practical, and slightly quirky all-wheel drive cars. They weren't known for making beautiful, high-end luxury coupes, but they wanted to change that. So, they hired one of the most famous car designers in the world, Giorgetto Giugiaro, the man who designed the DeLorean and the Lotus Esprit. The car he designed for them was the 1992 Subaru SVX. The SVX was a stunning piece of design. It had smooth, flowing lines and a canopy-like roof that made it look like the cockpit of a fighter jet. But its most memorable and strangest feature was its windows. It had a bizarre window-within-a-window design. There was a large fixed piece of glass and then a smaller separate section that was the only part that could be rolled down. The look was incredibly futuristic and unique. Under the skin, it had a powerful flat-six engine and Subaru's advanced all-wheel drive system. It was a true high-tech luxury car. So why did it fail so badly? Well, for starters, it was a Subaru. Back then, people just weren't willing to pay a premium price for a car with a Subaru badge, no matter how good it was. The SVX was the most expensive car they had ever made. The other big problem was the transmission. For some reason, Subaru decided to only offer the SVX with a 4-speed automatic. A high-end sports coupe with no manual transmission option was a huge turnoff for car enthusiasts. People loved the way it looked, but the high price and the lack of a stick shift doomed it from the start. The SVX looked like a jet fighter, but our next car was actually built using jet fighter technology by a man who promised to create the most extreme American supercar in history. 15. Vector W8. In the world of supercars, there are famous names like Ferrari and Lamborghini. And then there is Vector. In the late 1980s, a man named Gerald Wiegert set out to build an American supercar that would be more advanced and more powerful than anything coming out of Europe. He used his background in aerospace design to create the Vector W8. The W8 was less of a car and more of a low-flying aircraft for the road. The body was made of lightweight carbon fiber and Kevlar, the same stuff used in military planes. The chassis was bonded and riveted like an airplane fuselage. The interior looked like the cockpit of a fighter jet, with a digital screen and dozens of buttons and switches. And the engine was a twin turbocharged V8 that supposedly produced over 600 horsepower. The company claimed it could go over 240 miles per hour. It was the most extreme high-tech car of its era. But here's the kicker: it was all a bit of a fantasy. The car was insanely expensive, costing over $400,000 in 1990. The company built them by hand at an incredibly slow pace. Only about 17 customer cars were ever actually built, and those amazing performance claims were never officially verified. The company was plagued by internal drama and financial problems. The Vector W8 was a stunning machine, a true poster car, but it was more of a dream than a real car company. It was a brilliant, ambitious failure that shined brightly for a moment and then disappeared.